Kylee Van Horn, welcome to the podcast. So great to have you along. I have really been enjoying your new book, Practical Fueling for Endurance Athletes. And I knew of you before that. Your podcast, Your Diet Sucks. That's with your buddy Zoe. Awesome podcast. It's informative. It's funny. It's spicy. It's edgy. I really enjoy listening to it. I've recommended it to many of my endurance coaching clients, and some of my clients also work with you for nutrition stuff, whether that's, what are they putting into their bodies during training and racing, but also what are they consuming around the clock. You've been super helpful with that. So welcome to the podcast, and it's great to have you along.
Yeah, I'm excited to be a part here and chat with everyone out there. It's been it's been kind of a journey, getting to this point. Like I became a sports dietitian in 2018 and then kind of decided like I'm just gonna do my own business. And a lot of people that were my internship mentors were like, "You're crazy." But ended up working out. I've worked with like thousands of different types of endurance athletes over the years, which has been great. And then started the podcast with Zoe last year. And we released our first episode in July. So that's been a journey too. Like just doing something different creatively has been kind of fun. So I get that like one-on-one work with athletes, and then I also get to have fun in a like different creative way too. As you probably know with this podcast, it's a nice mix to be able to like have something like this you created and then get to do that one-on-one work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, way to go. Yeah, self-employment, not always the easiest path, but can be a great path and can be a great opportunity, I think, for impact and human connection, hopefully helping people, but also setting up a life that you want to live. And yeah, once again, listeners, Your Diet Sucks is the podcast. You guys you're a great pair on there. And I love, I was listening to one, I think it was called something like Your Nutrition Documentary Sucks is the title of the
Yes.
podcast episode. And you debunk some of these, whether it's Super Size Me or Game Changers, which a lot of people haven't seen or probably have seen. And, at the beginning of it, you're like, this is a podcast where we don't measure boners, which of course is a spinoff from the Game Changers one. So yeah, there's humor. Yeah, it's really good.
Well,
Anything else we should know about the podcast?
Yeah, so it's a fun way. I think the big thing that I want people to recognize with Your Diet Sucks is we're taking a look at things from a scientific lens. So we're trying to present research from all sides. If there is actual research to support like a certain thing, like, whether it's like a low carb diet or something like that, we're looking at all of the things on the different sides of the maybe argument or topic. And then we're trying to leave people with the questions to help them like make their own decisions. So it's not like our main goal is to not be an influencer in this space. We're more like that journalistic, science-based outside voice that's helping people navigate all the craziness that's out there in the diet world. And so our big goal is to provide you a framework on the history of these topics, what the science is saying right now, and then we're leaving you with some questions to be able to ask yourself and help people navigate in an easier manner. And I think like relating that to my job, that's what I feel like I'm doing all the time. I work with so many endurance athletes that are like, oh, well, I know all of this stuff, but like I don't know how to put it together, or I don't know what actually applies to me, with my sport or me as a person and my goals. And so everyone has a different situation, right? Like fueling for Skimo is going to be different than fueling for the Leadville 100. So you got to remember that like you have to treat yourself as that individual. And even if you do multiple sports, you should be treating yourself as like, oh, I need to have a different fueling plan for Skimo than maybe I would for the Leadville 100. So remember that nutrition's always changing, like the research is always changing, recommendations are always changing, and you as a person are always changing. And so trying to navigate that in a way that makes sense for you, that's personalized, I think is a big takeaway that I always like for people to think about. It's not a one size fits all, everyone should do keto, low carb, high fat. Like you've got to consider what your situation is in the approach that you're taking from the fueling perspective.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree, Kylie, and that's something I like about the podcast, and I think that also your book, Practical Fueling for Endurance Athletes, which we'll get into here. It's not dogmatic, and you're not pitching or selling something in particular. And I think one of the key takeaways is like, do what works for you, not only
Mm-hmm.
athletically but also in your life, in your schedule, in your phase of life. Your podcast, and this is a compliment, like this is one I would recommend to my daughter and her teenage friends, because I like what you're saying kind of about body image and those kind of things, but also just like I said, it's not like one thing in particular. It's
Mm-hmm.
not here's this panacea or something. So
Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah.
have a lot of people that have told me, like, I wish I had this type of podcast when
Yes.
I was growing up, because it's like it very helps you navigate the challenging topics in the nutrition space. And it's not just for endurance athletes either. It's for like people doing fitness or people just like that live in a body and eat food. So we try to include a variety of topics that are going to apply to a wider lens of pretty much everyone. Like our most recent episode was on organic and like, should I eat organic
Mm,
food? And so, yes, that applies to athletes, but other people too. And so, like it's been great to be able to, like I said, have that work with the athletes I do, but also reach a wider audience and try to have a positive impact on the space. Because I think one of my biggest challenges as a sports dietitian is kind of fighting back against this idea of like cookie cutter plans and a one size fits all and diet trends that are out there. That, hey, like, great, if you want to do that, awesome, but like N of one and trying to impact and influence people using that N of one, I think that can become problematic, because that's where we start to see people having health problems as a result of extreme diets, or like mental health
mm,
problems as a result of extreme diets. So consideration of all of that as like part of your fueling story. It's not just about like food is fuel. It's also about like connection and social and all that
yep.
kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Can I read an excerpt from the book? Our
Of
trusted
course.
friend and colleague Cam Smith could not be here because he's getting on a plane right now. He's coming back from a Team USA Skimo training camp. But in remembrance of Cam, here's something from the book, page 179, Practical Fueling for Endurance Athletes. Kylie, you probably know it's coming. Someone else we know is on there too. This little subsection is called Fueling for Winter Sports, such as cross-country skiing and ski mountaineering. It was midnight on the night of the 2018 Grand Traverse Ski Mountaineering Race from Crested Butte to Aspen. Cutting in. I'm pretty sure I was doing it that time too. I was not trying to win. Cam, though, was. Skiers took a backcountry route through the night with a partner of their choice. Sean Van Horn, eventual winner of the event, took off with his partner, Cam Smith. The two of them skied into the night with temperatures dropping to 30 degrees Fahrenheit. A couple of hours in, Sean went for a sip of water, but it was frozen, leaving him to ski with no hydration until the next aid station. Despite the fueling mishap, the team ended up making it to Aspen and skiing to victory. Way to go, Cam and Sean. Victory to the team, and great example of these events, whether it's skimo, whether it's ultra running, whether it's the Leadville 100 bike or an adventure race. The logistics of fueling in the conditions play a big role. So
Mhm.
what do
Mhm.
you think, Kylie? What's your
Yeah.
just that general topic before we get into, I have a multitude of notes, we won't get to them all, but here's one of them, fueling
Well,
for
I
something
think
like the Grand Traverse.
I think it's important, like with any race that someone's doing, to consider like, okay, what could the conditions what could the conditions be on race day at altitude or whatever, and also like what things could go wrong. And so
Mm.
like having your backup plans, like having your ABC plans, or like having your plans at aid stations is really important. And so like a big mistake that I see my athletes make is they're like, all right, I'm going to do gels and I'm going to do hydration mix. And like, that's my plan. I'm like, all right, well, what if you get palate fatigue? Or what if you can't even drink hydration mix anymore because you can't take the sweetness? Or what if your water freezes? Or what if your gels freeze or something like that? So
Hmm.
like all of these considerations that need to go into the thought process. In addition, I will say for Skimo, it's like wild because all of the gear considerations plus the nutrition considerations, it's a lot. It's a
Yes.
lot of logistics.
Yep.
um so but thinking about that stuff ahead of time, and like months ahead of time, not like the day before, like we're talking like 3 to 6 months ahead of time. Can you be thinking about this stuff? Can you be testing some things? Can you be making sure that you have, like, I'll have my athletes do like their plans on an Excel sheet or something, and like we'll do things like fluid loss testing, we'll do food choices at aid stations, we'll do if you do water versus hydration mix, like how are you going to get your calories in? So we'll have all these scenarios laid out on a fueling plan chart, and then people, you've got your main plan, but then you've got like, okay, here's what happens logistically if this happens. And so the reality is like sometimes you can't predict everything, right? But like at the same time, you can kind of be prepared for the things that you might not want to happen. And then at least you can kind of pivot or figure out what you want to do if that, if something goes wrong. And so that's a big
Yeah.
thing that I want people to understand is this, it's not just like, oh, I take my calories and my sodium and hydration, and that's it. It's if you want to be prepared, if you want to be adaptable, I would recommend thinking about all of these things ahead of time.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I mean, I often tell my athletes, Kylie, that my opinion is as a race gets longer, which I think usually means it gets slower, and it's
Mm-hmm.
also probably more dynamic in terms of condition, temperature, varying effort levels, times when you feel better and feel worse. In those cases, I think the fuel plan has to be both more dynamic and I would say more flexible. And that's
Mm-hmm.
great what you said about the spreadsheet. We got, hey, here's hopefully going into a race, an ultra run or a Grand Traverse ski race or an adventure race. Hopefully you don't know just one or two things that have worked for you in training. Hopefully you know 10 things,
Yeah.
that might work. And you also have the flexibility to know, okay, well, at Leadville at the aid stations, I know they have potato chips and cookies and M&Ms and ramen and mashed potatoes, and I know maybe which one of those might work for me in certain conditions.
Yeah, and it's like you might be able to get by with no plan for the aid stations and whatnot, but like, are you fully optimizing, like showing off your potential performance if you're not dialing that in or thinking about it ahead of time? And then, the other thing is like even thinking through, you know, which sections of the course have more vertical, or like, is it going to be hot in the middle of the
Yes.
day? I might not
Yep.
want as much like solid food. Or is it notoriously like freezing at the top of Star Pass? And so everything
Yes.
might
Yep.
freeze. So, like, working with your coach, like your coach can help with some of that,
Hmm.
and or working with a sports dietitian to try and help you
Yeah.
navigate, like thinking about some of these little things that you might overlook. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to know everything. That's why like experts can help you get to certain goals and levels of things if needed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I would totally recommend as an endurance coach, I often tell athletes like if you can expand your team, and that could be, a nutrition expert like you, maybe it's also a PT, maybe a mental performance coach,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things will really, it's not like an either again, assuming that like resources are available. It's great to do all these things or different things at different parts of the year.
Hmm. Yeah.
Could be
Yeah,
could
because
be an idea as
financially,
well.
it's challenging for people to have all of this support team. But like, that's
Yep.
also why I personally have different things that people can use to benefit them. Like the book is like an affordable way for
Yeah.
people to get a lot
Yep.
of nutrition info if you're
Yep.
self-driven. Or like I do single race fueling sessions for an hour. So it's like you don't have to do like high level one-on-one coaching with someone to get the information and application that you need. And like you said, like spreading it out or thinking about it like, okay, when might the nutrition piece makes sense throughout the year, and then maybe the sports performance piece makes sense closer to the race or whatever, like the mental performance piece. So like spreading out those team members if you need to. Like there's nothing wrong with doing that too.
Yeah, yeah, I like it. One other little thing I might recommend if you're listening to this, you're thinking, man, what Kylie's saying is great, especially on the topic of ultra running or any of these sports where you have a team with you in terms of a support crew. I think involving Kylie in that process or sharing these things with your crew is really important because you're at mile 80, it's the middle of the night, like man, you may not be thinking that straight, but if your support crew is on the same page with this book or with what Kylie has, said to you, that could be huge.
Oh yeah, like I mean, here's the thing though. Sometimes support crew, like maybe they haven't been around like ultra endurance stuff, and they're like, "Whoa, these people
Yeah.
are nuts!" Like, okay,
Yeah.
or like, what do I do? And so like that's where I have an athlete doing Cocodona right now, and
Mm,
we like laid out all of his stuff on the Excel sheet, and then we had like his backup stuff and everything, and so that was given to the crew so that they're aware, okay, if this happens, we're going to go to this or whatever. So that if you
yes.
lay it out for someone, like you're saying, in a more detailed manner, it doesn't have to be like hour 1, 2, 3, but like in a more
Yeah.
detailed manner, then that can help people that like either are experienced on crew or maybe they're new to crewing. Like it can help them
Mm.
navigate it the best for you so that it's helpful and not holding you back as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I like that if then idea, if it's extra hot, if it's extra
Hmm.
cold, if I'm, you helped one of a shared client we have, if I'm having gut issues,
Yeah.
what are the
Hmm.
things to do in advance and during, that's perfect. Into the book here, Kylie. At the end, there's a great part on takeaways, and I just want to go through a few of those. We've kind of rehashed some of these, but you say do what works for you in your life and not for someone else's. I love that. And you started the book this way as well. You said endurance athletes don't look a certain way. You shared actually a powerful story from your own experience,
Hmm.
I think, as a teenage runner, where like a certain vibe was sent to you. Endurance athletes are supposed to look a certain way, and it, probably resonated with lean, light, etc. And you push back against that, which I love. You talk about hydration and electrolytes, often overlooked tools that can improve fatigue levels. Yes. Yeah. And fatigue and also cognition. I think that's
Hmm.
a big piece. Like when you recognize your cognition in a race, in training, it's going down, mood is going down. Hey, that could be fueling and hydration. You talk about sleep
Hmm.
and rest, you say supplement wisely. And then here's the one I want to get into, Kylie. The C word, it's all over the internet. It's a bad word out there. And this word, of course, is carbs. But you say carbs are good. So let's get into this because this is a hot topic in nutrition. I mean, and so many carbs are bad, and we have a whole spectrum. You have zero carbs, keto or ketogenic diet. That's like almost none. You have a low carb diet. That could be the athlete that's like, I'm afraid of sugar, but I don't want to eat any, and I don't want to eat rice or pasta or bread, but I also want to like train hard. How do those
Hmm.
things work together? You have kind of, high carb, right? And there's a, there's like the recent high carb, which is like 90 grams of carbs per hour, which we used to say, how could you do that? And now there's like
Hmm.
super high carb, like 200 grams of carbs per
Yeah,
hour.
that's for
There's the,
athletes.
yeah, exactly. Blumenfeld and the Ironman is
Yeah.
taking in 200 carbs, or Cam Worf, just sets like
Hmm.
an Ironman bike record, apparently doing 200 grams of carbs per hour. So anyway, Kylie, I'm going on too long. Carbs.
No,
What do you
you're
think?
fine. I mean, I think it's to your point and to the book and what I said, like personalized nutrition is important to look at. And I think, I'm all for like pushing fueling limits and pushing yourself carb wise. But here's the thing, we always like, I think we, including all like us in there too, like we kind of get caught up in these ideas or trends, and we're like, oh, like maybe I should be doing that. Like maybe I should be doing 120 grams of carbs an hour. And so I think the challenge is, though, you have to think about your own personal physiology. Like with a lot of female identifying athletes that I work with, like they can't handle, anecdotally, they can't handle as much carbohydrate per hour. And so the ones that are trying to push themselves like really high have ended up getting some GI distress. And maybe the research hasn't like caught up there, you know, like we have to remember that like there are professional athletes maybe pushing the carb limits, but for a lot of us, we're not professional athletes either. So you have to remember that like you might be able to tolerate something a little bit different than the person that is pushing 120 an hour, 200 grams an hour. That's not to say you can't experiment. Again, like if you are experimenting, though, you have to be aware, whether it's low carb, high carb, of what the downsides are, what the possible downstream effects could be. So if you're doing tons of carbs per hour, like could you overdo it and end up with nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, something like that? If you're underdoing carbs, maybe you end up like bonking. Maybe you also have GI distress. Maybe you feel good in your training for a while, and then 6 months to a year down the line, you're like, oh man, I have like no energy, my hair's falling out, and you end up with thyroid issues. So it's like there are like things that can happen immediately and you would recognize that, or maybe like in the long term, and that wouldn't be something that you would recognize till later. But understanding here are the risks associated with pushing either end of the spectrum, and then deciding to experiment, you know, which again, like I'm all like guided experimentation, great. But, you know, if it's like this extreme, I'm going to 200 grams an hour, that's it, this is what I'm doing. Like, all right, well, if you're not considering those risks, then that I feel like is a little bit irresponsible. And then we have to consider like, okay, so the pro athlete versus like, you know, just like the everyday person, you might be pushing yourself, but you, again, like you might not be going at the same intensity as these pro athletes are going, and you might not
Yes.
be,
Yes.
so it's a different scenario, you know? And so that's where I think coaches can make a really big difference in, you know, you having this education yourself and being able to help your athletes understand, okay, like what might be a good balance for this person from a nutrition standpoint or from a training standpoint or whatever it is, and helping them make that decision, because that's part of the job of a coach, you know, is navigating that. Or, you know, again, like working with a professional in the sports nutrition space to help you navigate what is the best fit for me if I want to try this, you know?
Yep.
So I think viewing it more at like with more nuance, um, consideration of like what you're racing, the type of athlete you are, body frame size, all that hormonal status, all that kind of stuff is really important when you're figuring out your fueling plan. And then and then that's talking about like fueling during exercise. I think there's also this subcategory of like, okay, outside of exercise, my daily nutrition with carbs, like what should I do? And I think whenever people hear me promote carbohydrates, they're like, oh, like just this carb zealot. And I'm like, actually, I have a pretty like nuanced view on carbohydrates, and I recommend to athletes to think about adjusting your carb intake based on your training. So I'm not saying eat 500 grams of carbs every day. And that's something where that's a more, you know, if you want to do that, great. But, you know, if an athlete really wants to strategically shift their carb intake and have that more personalized approach, great. Like that's where I really help athletes figure out, okay, what is that going to look like for me? Or like I just worked with somebody, a triathlete, that he was doing low carb, like less than 100 grams of carbs a day, wasn't feeling the best, but he wasn't feeling terrible. He just wanted to kind of explore what would more carbs look like for me. And so instead of going, like, we didn't go extreme high carb, but we brought his carbs up to a level where he felt good. And he was like, all right, I can do this. Like, this feels good. This feels better than what I was doing before. And I don't feel like I'm like sick pushing in all these carbohydrates that I like, maybe I don't want to do too many. So that's where it can really, working with someone can shine and like help you figure out, okay, like this makes sense for me, my life, and what my goals are.
Yeah, I like it. What I like, Kylie, is there's nuance to it, and again,
Hmm.
it's not dogmatic. It's not one size fits all. I like what you said about variations in intensity, and that could be a given person. What are you doing, and for how long, or even parts of a race, the variation in intensity, and also in there's this social media, YouTube like comparisons natural, and we see in the ultra running world David Roach has this awesome, incredible breakthrough with a course record at Leadville where I think he took in, I think it was like 120 grams of carbs per hour nonstop for 16 hours. And that's awesome. And it worked for him. And the way I think about it in terms of intensity is, here's an elite athlete whose legs and lungs have a fitness level that allow a work rate for 16 hours that most people in the field, you are not
Hmm.
working that hard. Because you can't, like, because you're
Hmm.
not that fit and experienced. You probably don't have the genetics, and that's okay.
Yeah,
And you probably don't need that much fuel.
exactly. And it's, and thinking of that too from a I'll get a lot of questions about like, oh, just using gels and hydration mix for a 100 miler or something. And I'm
Mm,
like, well, like maybe if somebody's doing like going really, really hard for 20 hours or 16 hours or whatever. But honestly, like I work with some pros that are ultra runners, and they even will take in like little bits of chips or like some whole food options, and that works
yep.
for them. So it's like, again, like you don't have to just do gels and hydration mix because so and so is doing that. Like you can have alternative things that you're doing, and like yeah, maybe you're not going at as high of intensity. So like you could incorporate some more whole food options because like not as much blood is being diverted away from your gut and it's working a little bit better. So there's a lot of like individualized like variation and things to think about there when like making choices for your own fueling plan too.
Yeah, yeah. All of my 100-mile athletes, we are constantly working on what are real food options that work for you in
Hmm.
training and may work in racing, so that you have those available and you know which aid station things to consider for sure. A couple other things from the book, and I think these relate to each other. The second relates to what you just said about nutrition variation depending on training plans and needs. But the first one is you call this the nutrition sports hierarchy of foundation. Uh, hierarchy of foundational nutrition skills. And it's a pyramid. At the bottom, you say nutrition periodization, then nutrition timing, then hydration and electrolytes, then micronutrient intake, then sleep. And then at the very top, the smallest triangle is supplements. And that stood out to me because often, especially in what is sold to us, the supplement is this is the game changer, this is the panacea, this is gonna, and I think you have a balanced view. Like you're not saying no supplements ever, but it's this little thing on top.
Yeah, well, even creating a hierarchy like that is going to get like lashback from people because they're like, oh, but you're saying that hydration's not important or something. And that's
Yeah,
not true. But I think it's like it's meant to visually demonstrate like, okay, like if you don't have foundational like intake of nutrition, like that's a problem, like your daily nutrition intake. And so like when we look at that and the difference that that's going to make over supplements, like that's such a bigger percentage of like your performance and adaptation process is the overall daily nutrition and how you're eating than a supplement that you could go and get, off the internet, like a ketone supplement or something. Um, but again, like that's also not to say, okay, you shouldn't focus on hydration and electrolytes, or like maybe you have a deficiency, a known deficiency in something like vitamin D, and like you need a supplement. So, don't read, for people that do get the book, don't read too much into the actual visual of the hierarchy, but understand that like, yeah, that foundation should be like overall diet is the thing, the main point of that.
Yeah. 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 Page 17, you've got a great chart called Athletes Plate, and it's varied from easy day, moderate day, hard day, and extra hard day. Do you want to walk us through that, Kylie, or just, in general terms, what are the key differences on that continuum from, again,
Mhm.
an easier rest day to a hard or extra hard day? And when I think, hard or extra hard, that could be some combination of intensity and or duration of
Mhm.
exercise, and I might also even add like life, like an extra hard
Yeah,
day,
yeah,
like man,
yeah,
the stress, the work, the driving kids, like some of this stuff, like man, it tires you out way more than like the
yeah.
nice bike ride that you went on.
Well, it's super, that's why it's very difficult sometimes, even through like writing a book, to convey how to apply some of this information to people. Because, like, I've even gotten a couple emails about that specific, the athlete plate model, and they're like, well, how do I do this because of this in my life, and that's where like the personalization piece needs to come in. But the main point, like, this athlete plate model was a model that was developed at the University of Colorado, and so it's meant for like a lot of different types of athletes, not just endurance athletes. And so I find there's like a lot of confusion and flaws with the model itself, but the upside is that you can combine the definitions of the training days with endurance specific macronutrient calculations to get
Mm,
yourself in the right box for your nutrition. And that's always my big goal with athletes. Like, a lot of athletes come to me because they're tired of tracking, or they work with a macro coach and they don't feel like it applies to them as a runner or an
mm,
athlete, endurance athlete, and they're like, well, what do I do? I don't want to track the rest of my life. How do I do this? Or they're like so focused on like their calculated calories that then they like lose sight of how they're actually feeling. Like, they don't know how to interpret hunger and fullness at all, or they like suppress hunger because they're like, well, I can't trust that because I'm supposed to only have 2,000 calories a day. So
mm.
the point of this framework is that of a framework, right? Like, it's to help people boil down, like, could I get myself kind of in the right box for activity level, training, duration, and intensity? And then if I know around where I should be with my protein, carbs, and fats, then I can use that, get to that minimum, and then listen to hunger and fullness and be like, oh yeah, actually, I think I need a little bit more because this like wasn't quite enough. And that is a really, really hard, it sounds simple, but it is a really hard thing for people to develop and understand, because I
Yes.
think as a society, we're so busy and we're so numbers focused that we've
Yeah.
lost touch with this idea that, like, oh, I can actually trust my body, like, I can listen to hunger and fullness, or like, I don't know how to interpret hunger and fullness, and so that's a skill, like, that you, if you
Yeah.
don't know how to do that, or you don't even know what hunger feels like, then you need to make sure that you kind of get to that point and you kind of understand like how to interpret that and how to respond. It's not just recognition, it's also response. And so the appropriate
Mm,
response, if you're hungry, isn't to say, well, I met my calories or macros, I can't have anything else. The appropriate response is, I recognize that I'm hungry and I'm going to give myself an extra snack or meal or whatever it is that I think that I need. So
yeah.
the the athlete plate model, like, there's like four types of training days, just spoiler alert for people that don't know what it is, but like, they're categories. So like, there's an easy day, a moderate day, a hard day, and an extra hard day. And the names of the days don't mean that like it felt easy on an easy day. That's just how we're categorizing the nutrition on that day. And so it could be like, anything up to an hour, easy training. And then we got 1 to 2 hours easy training, or less than an hour with intervals. And so trying to, like, again, put yourself in the box, and then you've got your endurance specific macro ranges. You figure those things out, and then you try to get yourself to those minimums, and then listen to hunger and fullness. And then the other thing I emphasize to people is like, yeah, that those are also just like calculations. So depending on your metabolism, or how much activity, to your point, outside of your training you have going on. Like I've had to work with people, like I'm working with a horse trainer right now,
Mm,
that they're like
yeah.
very busy, very like
Yeah.
moving around a lot. So we have to adapt like kind of a little bit of a framework for that person. So they calculate things based on their training, but then they're going to add this much on if they do their work, like horse training work as well. And so it
Yeah.
helps them get, feel better and get more nutrition in. And so it's a way so that you don't have to track and count calories and all of that in the long term. That's the goal, is to get people a little bit away
Yep.
from that, but also like be intentional with what you're doing in some way.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I love that, Kylie, and I love what you're saying about the role of intuition, and it's not no data, just as in training.
Yeah.
I mean, I spend all day looking at heart rate data and power and vert and all this stuff, and like that matters. And at the end of the day, like I don't think it matters as much as like how do you feel as an athlete, and what are the perceptions in the moment, and also around the clock. And I would say that's similar with what you're putting into your body as well, and it
Yeah.
is hopefully it's like a natural skill, like running fast, running slow, running easy. Ideally those are just natural human things, but like many of us have lost those, and especially in a
Hmm.
world of all these numbers and metrics, we're steered away from like the actual intuition. Do
Yeah.
you have any, if you were to say one, let's say someone's like, I want to feel more intuitive, or maybe I want to be able to sense, do I need to eat more
Hmm.
carbs on a day or something? I mean,
Hmm.
what would you tell them? Like, how do people do that? How do they learn to that
Yeah.
process?
Well, again, it's challenging because it's like people have natural alterations in hunger and fullness hormones with,
Mm,
like, your hunger can go down with increased training volume and intensity. That's actually a natural thing that can occur. And so people get confused. And this is why, in my mind, you can't just rely on intuition, because if you did that,
mm,
you might
mm-hmm,
not eat, you might really underfuel. And then if you're
mm,
underfueling, it actually decreases hormones as well. So
mm-hmm,
it kind of gets complex here, but you can, in the book, I did put in there a hunger and fullness scale, on how to like rate your hunger and fullness with numbers, and trying to think like from 1 to 10, like 10 being overly stuffed or one being like I could eat anything. Um, you kind of want to live at a 5 to 6 as a satisfaction range. And then like you can start becoming, you could journal, you could try to become more aware of like, oh, like when I'm going for this snack in the afternoon, like I'll have some athletes that are like, oh, I just like mindlessly snack. And I'm like, well, what if we started paying attention to like rate your hunger before you go for the snack, and then see like, am I actually hungry or not? And it can be a good
mm-hmm,
exercise to kind of engage in and journal about a little bit. And I'm not saying you have to do it every day, but it's a great awareness tool. Or I'll have somebody that's like working on body comp change or something, and they're like very married to like number. A lot of people are very married to the numbers, but then I'll have them rate hunger, fullness, how they're recovering, how sore their
mm,
muscles are, that kind of stuff at the end, how their sleep is. Like those other biofeedback markers can be really good indicators of like, maybe I need more nutrition than what I'm giving my body. And with one person I'm working with right now on this, he is finally starting to get it, but he had a hard time at first because he was like, oh, I just got to stick to these numbers because I have these body comp goals. But then he realized, actually, like if I learn to listen to my body, I feel better. It's not making me as like hangry and like binging on foods and things like that. So, this is a better, like I'm marrying the two things, the intuition and the intention, and I'm able to achieve my goals better. And also, it's not hurting my training as much. And so that's a big thing too, is just like understanding, if you understand like the fatigue, the sore muscles, the sleep impacts, how your energy levels are throughout the day, all of that kind of stuff, it can give you some insight into, oh, okay, like this might be like a gateway, or like a look into how my body responds to having certain amounts of food, or maybe I do need to like rate my hunger and fullness to better be aware of these things that I'm doing with fueling.
Hmm. Yeah, very good. How about LEA and Red S? What do those acronyms stand for? What do we need to know? Signs, treatment, etc.
Yeah, so talking about under fueling, red S is relative energy deficiency in sport, or LEA is low energy availability. And so I think sometimes people get frustrated because like I will talk about like under fueling a lot, or LEA and reds on my social media, and there's a good reason for it, because there are, I mean, we know that like 60% of endurance athletes are susceptible to red S, disordered eating, eating disorders, that sort of thing. So it is in the grand scheme of things, it is going to be more prevalent in endurance athletes than the general population, I would say. And so that's really important for people to understand. And it's like, even if you say, well, this doesn't apply to me, I mean, I've worked with athletes that even just like under fueling on a big training day, like think about how that could impact performance and recovery. And so I try to get my athletes in the mindset of like, oh, do I need to try to better fuel myself on the training day to see what I can get out of the training, versus 3 days trying to dig myself out of a fueling hole that I could have been out of, and now I'm digging myself out. It could affect my workout 3 days later, you know? So
Totally.
so really like this could apply to in different ways. Like you might not actually have be diagnosed with relative energy deficiency in sport, but you can have within day energy deficits that could impact your performance and recovery. And so that's where in my book specifically, I encourage people to like challenge your fueling limits or push your fueling limits more than like, oh, like let's see like how I could make up for things or what I could get away with like restriction wise, and
Yeah.
see where that could get you from a performance perspective. And so, you know, red S, like the diagnosed red S, is a serious thing that people, you know, their activity level and their intake is not matching together. And then that starts to physiologically affect you. It starts to down regulate your body's natural processes, like your GI system, your hormonal production, your heart rate, your mental health. It impacts everyone differently. So if you look up like the IOC's statement on relative energy deficiency in sport, there's like this big tree of different symptoms that you can have, and it affects people very differently, depending on your own physiology and the level of underfueling that you're experiencing. But just people having awareness of like, you know, I think the biggest misconception is people are like, oh, I'm eating enough, like I am the same weight or something. You know, I haven't lost weight or anything like that. I'm not under fueling. And then when we start digging in, and it's like, well, your thyroid's not working and you're having all these GI issues and stuff, like you could still have red S and not like be underweight or lose weight. And so I think people having an understanding that like it's not just like you look a certain way and you weigh a certain amount, or you're a certain level of athlete to have red S. Like anyone can have red S.
Yeah.
Anyone can have underfueling. Anyone can underfuel on a single day. So it's like not again, it's not a one size like this is, you know, this is the underfueling thing and it doesn't apply to me. I think it can apply to a huge portion of our population in endurance sports.
Yeah, indeed. Very good, Kylie. And I also want to add including men. I think sometimes men,
Yes.
they see the low energy availability, the red S, like, oh, these are female specific issues. You know, I think the answer is no. And very briefly, just anecdotally, about 10 years ago, I kind of got sucked into the low carb, high fat. Like it was
Yeah.
a big thing, especially in ultra running, like do more with less fuel. And I went for it, and man, it messed me up. Like I was training hard, I was racing a lot, and it
Hmm.
messed things up systemically for quite some time. And for
Uh-huh.
me, going, explore, I'm glad that I, realized and learned more and realized, boy, basically I got sucked into a fad.
Hmm.
It was bad. So,
Yeah,
uh,
it's
you
hard
know,
because like
um,
in the moment, again, like you might be feeling pretty good, but if you don't
yeah,
understand the downstream effects that that can have on you, it
exactly.
you won't realize it until later. And I mean, I'm this person that I'm bringing up the cocodona person again because I'm actually really
Mm,
proud of this person. Tried to do cocodona the year before, was doing low carb, high fat, got a stress fracture. And
mm,
was, he didn't realize that actually, even if you're eating enough calories, if you're eating low carb, it can actually increase bone resorption factors, meaning bone breakdown factors. And
yeah,
so it can make you
yeah,
more susceptible to injury. Again, not everyone, like I know there are anomalies out there and professional ultra runners that thrive on this diet, but I think we have to consider like, do these people have maybe a different genetic makeup and whatnot that allows for them to handle that? And then what is my specific situation? And then here are the
yeah,
things that can happen if I remain low carb, high fat, and I don't like I'm not aware that these things can happen, you know? And so it took this person a year to get out of this low energy availability state and
yep,
switch his entire fueling protocol and completely turn things around this year. And it's just like that's really cool. But I also want people to realize like this is I guess a serious thing that in regards to like you might not recognize the damage you're doing until it's too late, and then you're like spending 2 years trying to get out of the damage that you've done, you know?
yeah, yeah. Mm. Oh man. Well, hey, high five to this person. Way to go. Good job
Yeah.
persevering. And I think that also speaks to Kylie. Like we're human and sometimes we like nail things and sometimes we make mistakes. And like, because you've made a mistake or you're making a mistake now or, whatever, like no judgment, just,
Yeah.
move forward. And sometimes the answers aren't clear, which is furthermore like a great reason to get input from an expert like you, or your book, Practical Fueling for Endurance Athletes, which again, a number of my clients have ordered it. We've been talking about it. It's really good stuff.
Awesome.
As we wrap up, Kylie, in any just very briefly, like common mistakes, and some of these are outlined in the book, but what are common mistakes you see endurance athletes making, whether that's eating around the clock and or during training or racing?
Yeah, I think, ooh, this is a broad topic, but
We could go forever, but 2 minutes. Go ahead.
we've kind of talked about it a little bit. I think getting sucked into supplements that like
Mm,
might make a difference, but overall you need to have your daily fueling dialed in and your like overall race plan dialed in. I think those are bigger, have bigger impacts than the supplements, which if you have those things dialed in, then great. Like look at the research behind the supplement, trial it in training. Don't just trial it on race day.
yeah.
um, I
Yep.
think the fueling plan thing we talked about too, like people wait until the last minute to dial in their actual race, like specific fueling plan. Not that they don't have like a daily or a long run or long training session fueling plan, but race specific, and they wait to determine, oh yeah, like I forgot Leadville has this and whatever. Like, why don't you do that 3 to 6 months beforehand so then you can get
Try to
yourself
practice those
ready?
things. Yeah, just like you
Yeah.
would practice the vert or your gear
Hmm.
or your shoes. Like, man, even more so, this is huge. You got to practice it day in,
Oh
day
yeah.
out.
I mean, I have some quotes from triathlete Matt Hansen. He's really,
Yeah,
really
he was
great
all over
person.
the book. He said a bunch of good
Yeah.
stuff. He's like,
Yeah,
go into the
he's
race and you want to know carbs, electrolytes, fluids per hour. Like, boom, there you go, man.
Yeah, he's awesome though. He's been a great athlete to be in contact with, but he kind of, talked about in some of the questions I asked him about how he's always evaluating his plans and like how did the
Yes,
race go and how did I feel in this and like
work in
do it.
progress.
Yeah, work is always a work in progress, and I think that's an important thing to remember. And it's also important to remember like that ties into the personalization piece, right? So it's not just like what so and so is doing on TikTok or Instagram. It's like I need to figure out what's going to work for me.
Yes.
So there's that piece. And then also, I would say, I'm trying to think back, like what other things, overarching themes. I think more and more athletes are discovering the importance of like dial in your actual fluid loss rate, dial in like sodium sweat concept. There are tools out there, like there
Yep.
are easy ways to measure some of this stuff. Like, why are we leaving that on the table if you could have a
Yeah.
more accurate way of looking at that and making sure you're in the right fueling box, you know? So
Yep.
work with your coach on that. If you don't know how to do it, like hopefully your coach knows how to do it and they can help you.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and then yeah, and then my big thing, and I write this like whenever I write a message to anyone that I'm like signing a book for, I'm always like keep pushing your fueling limits. And I think
Mm. Yep.
that's my outlook for my athletes is less is not better. I would rather people be challenging these ideas and trying to see where they can get with having that intention and intuition focus. And so I'd encourage everyone out there to like, if that's not the approach that you've taken before, like maybe you can shift your perspective and take a different outlook this year.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, Kylee, I love it. We've only scratched the tip of the
I
iceberg here.
know.
There's so much more. I mean, the book is awesome. Practical Fueling for Endurance Athletes. YouTube audience, check it out. There it is. She signed my book. Keep pushing your fueling limits. Yeah, Kylee, I agree. Like I'm pushing my fueling limits. And a lot, I mean, for me these days, a lot of it's just research for coaching athletes, like trying stuff, figuring out what works. And
Great.
I think you talk about that too. Yeah, thanks. And any other places we should find you? We talked about the podcast. Remind us, where are you on Instagram? Yourself and the podcast. What's the best website? Where else should we look out for you, Kylee? In person, on the trails, on the slopes. Where can we find you?
Yeah, so I live in Carbondale, Colorado, so over near Aspen. If anyone's ever in the
Yep.
area, give me a shout out. And my website is flynutrition.org. Instagram flynutrition3, and then the podcast is Your Diet Sucks Pod on Instagram. And then we're found on all the major like podcast platforms as well.
Nice. Cool. And the book, I know it's at various places online, probably local bookstores. I like to remind people, if your local bookstore doesn't have a book, you can often request it and they can order, hopefully, a number of them from Kylie's publisher. But even if they just order one, you're supporting the
Hmm.
author and the local bookstore. Great way to get books.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Libraries too. Those are good as well. All right, Kylee. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.